Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, as chairman of the Arab International Women's Forum, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all today to this virtual roundtable jointly hosted in partnership with the Pearl Initiative on Diversity on Corporate Boards and MENA Family Business. This is the first series of initiatives that AIWF is undertaking to promote gender, partially in executive leadership on boards and in the management and succession of family businesses. We have always had a resolute focus on developing and nurturing opportunities for women's advancement and leadership. In all the sectors and spheres, we believe that now is the time to bring these virtual conversations about gender diversity in the private sector to the top of the agenda. In the MENA, despite the ever-increasing number of women in board leadership roles in the region, progress is not being made quickly enough. A 2016 study of nearly 1,500 publicly listed companies in 13 countries across MENA region found that only 17% had some female representation on their boards. Of those, only 4% had female board chairs. The banking and financial services industry had the highest female representation, with media companies among the worst performers, with not a single woman on their boards. As the World Economic Forum has noted, CEOs have had an opportunity to lead by example through actions that demonstratively advance and empower women in the workplace. Today, we will hear from 3 senior leaders who are true champions of diversity and find out from them what is working and where we still need to invest energy and focus. Lastly, allow me to express my warm appreciation to our long-standing institution partner, the Pearl Initiative, and all the team behind this amazing event, and to our global partners, PepsiCo, PwC, for their valued support for today's initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Afnan. A very good afternoon to everyone that is joining us today. My name is Rania Saadawi, and I am the Executive Director at the Pearl Initiative. And it is our pleasure to welcome you to today's virtual panel discussion in partnership with Arab International Women's Forum. For those who are not familiar with the Pearl Initiative, allow me to introduce the organization briefly. The Pearl Initiative was established in 2010 by Gulf regional business leaders and the United Nations Office for Partnerships as a local Gulf-based nonprofit organization created by business leaders for businesses to promote corporate governance, accountability, and transparency across the private sector. The Pearl Initiative has become the Gulf region's leading independent nonprofit organization working to improve corporate accountability across family firms, small businesses, tech startups, and philanthropic nonprofit organizations in the Gulf region. One of our key pillars and programs focuses on making the business case for diversity and business leadership. And we are honored to be having a long-standing partnership with Arab International Women's Forum to explore the individual journeys and experiences of leaders and companies across the region and globally in terms of diversity on corporate boards and business sustainability. Indeed, as Dr. Afnan noted, we know the advancements of women labor participation rate in the Gulf region has skyrocketed in the past 2 decades, driven and supported by government reforms and initiatives, and driven heavily by the private sector. Under Vision 2021, the UAE aims to become one of the 25 leading countries in terms of gender equality, supported by initiatives such as the UAE Gender Balance Council and the UAE Gender Inequality Index. In a relatively short time span of just 2 years, the labor force participation rate of Saudi women increased from 20% in late 2018 to 33% by the end of 2020. That's to say that the share of Saudi women in the labor market expanded by an incredible 64% in just 2 years. Private sector employment of Saudi women grew among most of the economic activities, with the majority showing an increase of over 10%. Female employment in labor-intensive sectors such as construction, manufacturing, accommodation, and food grew by 9%, 14%, and 40% respectively between 2019 and 2020. And yet, there are sobering statistics globally, as well as the region, on senior leadership of women. In terms of power and decision-making, a World Bank study found that women held only 28% of managerial positions globally in 2019. This is almost the same proportion as women who held managerial positions in 1995. A United Nations report in 2020 found that among Fortune 500 corporations, only 7.4%, 37 chief executive officers were women. So while we acknowledge the progress made for gender equality in the workplace has made notable strides, at present, women remain underrepresented in most leadership, professional, and technical roles. What this means is that both private and public sectors across the globe are missing out on the economic benefits by not embracing women's inclusion at leadership levels. Today, we are honored to be joined by business leaders who will discuss what can be done to promote gender parity in executive leadership on corporate boards, as well as across family businesses in the Gulf region, and collectively review what more needs to be done by businesses and leaders in terms of gender inclusion. And with this, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our moderator for today's session, as well as our esteemed panelists. Ms. Diana Wild is our moderator for today's session. Diana is an impact entrepreneur. She is the co-founder of Aurora 50, a social enterprise that created the Pathway 20 initiative, which works with market leaders and regulators to accelerate gender balance in the boardroom. Aurora 50 launched the initiative in March 2020 in the UAE with its anchor partner ADNOC, when only 3.5% of the UAE listed board seats were held by women. Pathway 20 nurtures executive female directors and helps them bridge the network gap by connecting them with seasoned directors. As the CEO of Aurora 50, Diana strives to support both men and women to accelerate gender balance through collaboration. Thank you, Diana, for joining us today and for guiding today's important conversation.
Thank you very much, Rania.
Joining us on today's panel is Her Excellency Mona Al Muayyad. Her Excellency Mona is the Managing Director of YK Al Muayyad and Sons and hails from one of Bahrain's most established entrepreneurial families and successful family businesses. Mona was also appointed a member of the Bahrain Shura Council, the second chamber in the Legislative House in Bahrain, in December 2018. She was the first woman to be elected to the board of the Bahrain Chamber of Commerce and Industry in 2001, and the first woman to be elected to the board of a publicly traded company in Bahrain, the Bahrain Maritime and Mercantile International Company. Her Excellency Mona is also the chairwoman and head of the audit committee of Ibda Bank, a microfinancing nonprofit bank that supports projects, micro projects, and enables women to improve their standards of living through self-employment. Her Excellency Mona is also a member of the board of the Arab International Women's Forum. Thank you, Your Excellency, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Joining us as well from the UAE is Mr. Hani Ashkar, the Middle East senior partner for PwC, and leads the firm's commitment to drive inclusion and diversity across the region. Mr. Hani has taken the initiative to increase female participation in leadership positions, creating accountability, setting targets at the junior level, and building an inclusive culture in the PwC firm as the CEO. Hani is also the founder of Middle East Action for Inclusion and Diversity Council, which brings together leaders from the private sector to share best practices and progresses in this key issue across the Middle East. Hani is a member of the board of both Arab International Women's Forum and the Pearl Initiative. Thank you, Hani, for joining us today. Last and certainly not least, Mr. Wael Ismail is joining us on today's panel discussion. Wael is the Vice President for Corporate Affairs for Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan, as well as the Sustainable Packaging Lead for Africa, Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, based in Dubai. Ismail joined PepsiCo in 2016 and has assumed several roles within the Public Policy and Government Affairs Division, focusing on developing and advocating for win-win public policy solutions. Ismail is passionate about driving PepsiCo's winning with purpose strategy in sustainable food systems. He is also the founding member of Project Circle, a circular economy coalition in the UAE in partnership with the Ministry of Climate Change in the UAE. We thank you all for joining us today for this really important panel discussion. And for you, our audience, as is often the case with our panel discussions virtually, we encourage you to send in questions using the Q&A function throughout today's session. It is meant to be interactive. It is meant to ask and answer your questions that you have for our panelists and moderators. And throughout today's session, our moderator and panel discussion panelists will be posing panel questions, polls to the audience. Thank you very much, and over to you, Diana.
Thank you so much, Rania, for the wonderful introduction and for introducing all of our esteemed speakers today. Thank you so much for the audience that's joining us as well. Please do send in your questions as we go through the questions. So according to the World Bank statistics, the UAE has the highest level of women participating in the workforce across MENA at 57.5%. And sadly, we know that in the Middle East region that we have one of the lowest level of female representations in the corporate boards globally. The level of female representation on company boards, though, in the UAE and across the region is projected to significantly increase, especially within the UAE, since ESCA has instructed that all of the listed firms in the country must have at least one female member on their board of directors. According to research by Heidrick and Struggles, roughly 12% of board appointments in the last year were females. So things are moving. And according to the Council on Foreign Relations, if female participation in the UAE is fully equal to men's, this would be worth about $101 billion to the economy. So the business case is clearly there, and it's no wonder that organizations are putting a lot of effort into increasing the number of women in leadership and in their boardrooms. But what we are here today to discuss is obviously how that can be done and the tried and tested methods to making this happen faster. So without further ado, Your Excellency, Mona, you have more women than men on your board. Your father very much led the business and said that gender equality was always been part of the family. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yes. First, I would like to thank AIWF for inviting me to this webinar. And I like to always to share my experience, which will benefit other women who are younger and they are starting their life. About my family, I mean, we are in the board of directors. We are 7 women and 6 men. So we have more women than men. It just happened like this because we are 4 sisters and we have nieces also and 2 brothers. So it just happened that, you know, we are more females than men. When my father died, we own shareholding in the company, and naturally, each one of us represent their share. And of course, this all comes from my father because he was really believed in women. He believed that women should have as good education as the boys. So he sent us to universities and he sent us to Europe, and I'm talking about the 70s and not now, which is a long time ago. And at that time, women were not even allowed to go out of their home, let alone send them to Europe. And but he really believed in that. And when I graduated and I joined the business, of course, I wasn't brought with a golden spoon because being a woman, well, of course, I joined the business, but like my brother, he was the managing director from day one. While I was put in the accounting department, and I worked there for about 10 years. And from there, I mean, my father saw that he believed, he liked my work, and he promoted me to the to be the manager of the furniture division, and from there to the automobile division. So basically it was harder than, my journey was much harder than my brother. But this is naturally, I mean, women have to compete with men, not on equal right, on a very, the man has, 100% time for his work, while woman has half of her time for her husband, for her children, for other social, requirements. So basically I was really hard workers, and I wanted to prove to my father that I'm as good as my brothers. And that's why, he recognized me in the end.
So what advice, acknowledging obviously that you've had to work harder during that time than your brothers, what advice do you have for women working in family businesses who have board aspirations?
Yes, my biggest advice to all women is to educate themselves, take as much courses as they can, even online, about accounting, about HR, about human resources. All these items help the woman to come up on the board. So, don't be satisfied with your BA degree or BSc degree. You just need to take more and more courses, and also work very hard. I mean, if the man works 8 hours or 12 hours, you should work more. Even from home, you should work. And you should educate yourself about general knowledge, about what goes on in life, and not just limit yourself to your studies. And at the same time, I feel women, and I see it in our company, women have a tendency to be more fair and more transparent. Of course, I'm not saying that men are not fair. There are some men who are, but the majority of women, they take things very seriously, and they, especially with taking care of employees, looking at their, the need of the women at home. And I feel it's very important that you have to be human to succeed in business. Business is not about just making profit. It's about, dealing with other people and caring about other people, caring about your employees, about your customers. And that's what our company is. We are very good at that.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, Your Excellency. It's really interesting hearing you talking about that sort of purpose. And this is one of the things that prior to this session, we talked about a little bit is, looking at that, what is that genuine interest then, if we're going to actually shift that. I'd like to welcome the other panelists to the discussion at this point. If we're looking to gauge sort of genuine interest, here Her Excellency is talking about it kind of being built into the DNA of the business. How do we achieve that trickle-down effect of diversity being demonstrated specifically in your own organizations? Kani, maybe you'd like to start?
Sure. So, we at PwC in the region, I think it's a really interesting case study on this topic. And just to give a bit of background, so we're 6,000 professionals across 12 countries. Average age is about 30, and all 6,000 are university graduates, and so it's a professional environment, and one which I wouldn't characterize as difficult from a working perspective in terms of it's not in a factory, it's not remote location, etc. This is a role or a position that college graduates would generally aspire for and see as a good start to their careers. 6 levels across the company, so from associates to partners, and in a classic kind of pyramid shape. So when we looked at this, and when I came into my role about 8 years ago, we had 18% female overall, and at the partner level we were sort of 2% at the partner level, and it just wasn't acceptable by any measure. And we started on our journey to try to balance this, and we set some goals for ourselves. We said overall we should try to get it to 40% by 2024 at the overall level and 20% at the partner level. So the first thing we did was we said let's set some ambitious goals. And then we went about with some quick wins, I would say. So at the graduate level, and in the introduction, we heard that the majority of graduates, of university graduates, even in engineering, even at the postgraduate level in our region, are women. And so to not be able to tap into that pool of talent means we'd be losing quite a lot. So the first thing we did was kind of a no-brainer. We said, well, 50% of graduates must be women. 50% of graduates that we recruit in to the firm must be women. So we fixed it immediately, with just one change in policy at the junior level. But of course, it gets much harder the more senior that you get within the firm, and we see that missing rung on the ladder, or whatever you'd like to call it. But it, the balance shifts quickly as you get more senior, and the leakiest part of that is probably right in the middle of that pyramid. So we set about doing lots of things. We kind of put in accountability. So we said every business unit leader, every line of service leader, every geographical leader, every industry leader needs to have diversity within their team. We baked that into people's KPIs. And then we did the policies that most people would hear about, around flexibility, say, around maternity leave and around paternity leave. And on paternity leave, what I would say here is initially, people said, well, in the Middle East, new fathers typically would not spend a lot of time at home. And in fact, new mothers would say to new fathers, please leave me alone for the first few weeks or whatever. And that's not very cultural. But what we realized very quickly is that paternity leave is not about what you do at home necessarily. It's about creating a level playing field, and it's about destigmatizing leave and making it okay for either gender to be on leave, such that if women are on maternity leave or any other kind of leave, actually, it's not sort of held against them and impedes their progress. So we did that. We did flexibility right across the board, and what we noticed was that it helped everyone and created a more sort of positive environment, because whenever you do something that only one gender is doing and the other is not, then it's sort of imbalancing that playing field. And so we set about doing all kinds of things like that, and it started to move the needle. I think if you fill the pyramid from the bottom up, it starts after a couple of years to make a difference. So we moved it from 18% to 37%. We're not there. And then at the partner level, we moved it to about 10%, and we're not there either. Globally, those percentages are closer to 50 and closer to about 30% if you look at across the entire PwC network, across the 300,000 people around the world. So a lot to do, Diana, but some good progress.
Very good progress.
And we still see a lot more to do. And I don't want to hog up all the time, but I'll just pause there if you want to ask the other panelists and then come back.
Thank you. I think there's some brilliant insights there and many takeaways for the audience if they're looking to implement as well. So thank you for that. If I can just return to the original question as well, we were looking at gauging genuine interest and how has the trickle-down effect of diversity been demonstrated specifically in your organization? Can you maybe share your thoughts on that as well?
Sure, thanks, Dan. I think, to Hani's point, it's where we have both, we have a professional network of people working usually in, headquarters, etc. But we also have factories, we have distribution centers, we have people engaging across society. So it becomes more challenging as well to get across that trickle-down effect, moving across the board from the factory floor to distribution trucks to dealing with retailers on a daily basis. But honestly, without being able to fill up all of these different populations with the right level of diversity and gender parity, then it becomes very difficult to get to the top. Because you can always try to get more senior leaders engaged from the outside the environment. But as Hani mentioned, you have to get that middle management piece right. And you have to allow opportunity for people to grow within the company, or else you're going to continue to staff from on top, which is not really sustainable. And I think what we try to focus on is creating, opportunities for both genders to be able to operate. And I think that's the fundamental part that we can really enable. And part of the strategy is winning with purpose. We've launched PepsiCo Positive, which is really changing how we operate. And that's the background that you see on my screen. It's a lot to do with sustainability, but we see diversity as a critical part of that, because you cannot really talk about sustainability and having that positive relationship with the planet without having people at the heart of it. So a lot of the things that we do is focused on how do you create those opportunities across the board. But I would like to call out some of them that we've really been proud of, especially in Saudi, where, for example, we have 2 manufacturing plants, one in Riyadh, one in Dammam, and we've been able to, create production lines, packaging lines purely for women. But once you start that process, you realize where are the bottlenecks. So a lot of people were applying, a lot of women were applying for those roles. But when we dug deeper, we found out that their critical issue was transportation. They were finding it very difficult to leave their homes early in the morning or return late at night, especially in an environment like Saudi or other parts of the Middle East. So we started to see how we can plug that gap and provide them, safe space for them to be going back and forth from their home. And that then allowed us to go back even to the government and try to get second and third shifts at different parts of the day. So that has been also, part of the work that we do. Very proud of the work as well that we've done on putting much more women facing customers. You put women in an environment like Saudi, like the general Middle East, to deal with retailers, traditional trade, modern trade, whatever have you, was always very challenging. You're dealing with different sets of, it's not just the office environment, it's very different. So we've been able to make very good progress in that. But I think fundamentally where it stands is what Mamuna said. I think Her Excellency, it's, championing diversity has to be a personal, I think, drive. So a lot of us on this call and many others championing this see it. So, my father passed away at a very young age. My mother, she used to work, she used to take care of the house, never felt that there is anything missing or a gap. And that also shapes your outlook in life and how you want, I have a daughter, how you want the role models that she has. But that's, it's challenging. It's not easy. We say it's easy for women to do this or for men to do this, but I think trying to support them as much as possible. And what Hani said is absolutely right. For people to take leave, without trying to qualify it or justify it or, and give those opportunities to people is fundamental. And I think the last point I want to raise is, I think having senior leaders at the highest level, men and women, championing this is very important, but also giving especially women leaders at very senior positions. So, one of my, my champions has been Rania Rizet, who passed away last year. She's been a key champion for us in this agenda. And when she was there in PepsiCo driving it, you see a lot of women looking up to her. She understands their story, they understand her progress and journey. And that has helped us really, pave the way, and she's helped pave the way for a lot of people. So having those leaders at that level, no matter how many men you have championing this, I think having women leaders at that level exhibiting it day to day, relating to those stories, I think cannot be really overstated, because that's a critical part. And we have to do much more. Globally, we have almost, we're reaching our parity of 50-50, we're at 40%. But if you go down to the numbers and the geographies, you'll find a lot of disparities that we need to really equalize and pave the way by creating, I think, those equal opportunities. So I'll pause here as well, and happy to delve deeper as we progress.
Thank you, Wael. Again, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I think again there's a huge amount of value in touching upon those, like you say, asking the questions, finding out what the pain points are that are actually stopping this. And if you have that genuine interest, then obviously you're going to dive deeper into that. So it's great to see that organizations are doing that and not just assuming from the top that they know what the answers are. It's a great example. We would like to obviously have the audience engaged in this as well. So if we can launch our first poll, the question that you should see on your screen is, does your organization have a clearly defined strategy in place? Yes or no? So we'll just wait for the audience to complete their answers. Okay, so we've got a few more coming in. And don't forget, obviously, you can also put your questions into the box as well. If you have some, we'll go through those in a minute as well. So you've got about 30 seconds left to answer. Great. So if we can share the results, wonderful. So yes, 67% and no, 33%. So they're actually pretty good numbers from what we hear in the market. I think things have really shifted in the last year, especially. And there is obviously a lot more awareness around the business case for doing this. So people are definitely implementing more and more strategies. And there's always been organizations like the ones that we have here today who've been leading in this space. And, you know, it's almost baked into the DNA of the companies. But it's wonderful to see this moving into other and spreading in with other organizations as well. So we'd love to kind of look a little bit more deeply with our panelists. And we've heard quite a lot now in terms of, you know, tested, tried strategies, things that are working, things that still need to be moved forward. But I'm curious, in terms of unconscious bias being factored into diversity strategy, research and policy, what have you seen as best practices to navigate issues of unconscious bias in the workplace? And I'm happy for all of the panel members to kind of jump in on this one. Hani, would you like to lead?
Sure. So this is something that we've been focused on quite a lot recently. And we've been looking at it from the perspective of, well, let's try to tackle this. I mean, clearly there's something going on there, right? And what's happened, I think, and by the way, COVID has accelerated a lot of this analysis that we're doing, but to have the data, I think, is really helpful and really useful, because you get to see the trends, you get to see what's working, what's not working, where are the issues in the business, and where is it working, and then you know, you can start to take some policy decisions as a result of that. So we have implemented unconscious bias training as part of the annual mandatory training that everyone does. So at the end of the year, in order to sort of complete your annual certification, you have to have done unconscious bias training. We made that mandatory. And then in looking at things like how we allocate people to engagements, and then how we do our annual performance review at the end of the year, we kind of look at the data, proportion of people promoted, proportion of our people you know, with high utilization, which types of projects people are working on, et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at the data, you can start to see where some of that unconscious bias might start to come in, and we intervene. So we go in and we say, well, why are only you know, 30% of the female associates promoted to senior associates, and whereas that proportion for men is 60%. It's obviously not typically that big, but when you see that, then you go into that second level of investigation and understand exactly what's going on. We've also done in those, because we do, you know, performance appraisal and moderation sessions, we have representatives in the room whose job it is specifically to review whether there's any unconscious bias, or whether the data is suggesting any unconscious bias filtering through. So we do that as well, and we you know, we're trying to see if that helps, if that moves things along. You can also look at things like when female colleagues go on maternity leave, is their performance rating affected for that year? And we set up a policy that says, well, actually we'll sort of freeze your performance appraisal at the point before you go on maternity leave, so that you're not disadvantaged when you do go on leave. And that applies to all types of leave, actually, not just maternity leave. So a lot of things, Diana, there that aren't focused on that topic, but really it's a combination of getting everyone up to a sort of minimum level, and then intervening, reviewing the data, looking for the bias, and then trying to address the reasons that are making that happen.
Thank you, Hani. Your Excellency, would you like to comment?
Yes, I share with Hani his views. And, you know, we noticed like 10 years ago that most women, we always have women employees, but we just noticed that they don't go up the ladder. They just freeze at the lower level. So we made this committee for women, which has about 6 or 7 women and maybe 3 men from our employees. And we looked at each woman and what level she is in and what to do to push her towards a higher level. And today I'm very proud to say that we have at least 5 managers who are women, which we never had before. We always had managers, men. And also we found that with women, there are, there is so much, we brought so many, let's say, what do I call it? So many things to help women to go up the ladder by taking care of their maternity leave, their feeding time, and also, helping them with all the difficult time when they have small children. They can work from home. They can have, the work from online, and also they can come at different times to the office. They can come part-time to the office without affecting their promotion. When they come part-time to the office, then they still can get their social securities, which was not there before. So all this helped women to excel at what they are doing. And of course, we have lots of programs for women and the corporate social responsibilities, for walkathon, for breast cancer, for, young children activities. So with all this, we found that our women employees are very happy at work, and they feel that they are like in one big family and not in an organization. And that's very important to create this happy, loving atmosphere for women at work.
So it sounds like you're creating that culture to really help plugging some of those holes from both yourself and from Hani, addressing that leaky pipeline that we'd already talked a little bit about.
Yeah, by the way, while I wanted
Sorry.
I wanted to say something about Rania, because she was a good friend of ours, and I've seen her many times, and she was just a wonderful human being. And I'm so sad to see her not there anymore. And she was just a perfect model for hardworking women employees.
And very much inspiring.
Yeah.
So we've had a great question also come in from the audience. So for our panel, I'll just read this for you. This is from Doris Martin. She asks, is it healthy to impose inclusive female quotas in the boardroom in both private and public sectors? And what works better, merit-based or quotas and inclusive promotion in leadership positions in an organization? So perhaps you'd like, sorry, go on. Yeah.
Sure. I'll say a few words and then I'll pass it on to Hani, because I know that he wanted to say something. So I think on the long run, of course, merit is what distinguishes males and females. But I think in areas where you have significant gaps, I think you need to start somewhere, and that can happen through quotas or mandating certain percentages, etc. Because in certain environments, the bias is going to always tilt you towards a certain gender. Yeah, and there is no escaping it. So for example, one of the areas that we work very closely with is that on our beverage business, we work through managing franchise operations, franchise bottling companies. And usually that's, frankly, a male dominated division within our company. And we've noticed that if we don't have something that, will allow us to have more women, crack into this division, then it's not going to happen organically or naturally. So I think at the beginning, there needs to be some form of, deliberate direction to have much more women integrated across different levels in a certain function if you have a specific gap. But then I think as things progress, things were normalized, and we saw that more women now are becoming much more interested to apply for these roles because they've seen other women do it. And now they feel comfortable to be able to go into that environment, because a lot of people, especially in areas where we have much more female representation, such as, communications or HR or marketing, they want to stick with the jobs that they have because they see a better career progression for them versus going into another area where, it's much more skewed towards the male population. So I think in certain points in time, depending on the division that we're trying to make an impact in, but I think it's a good starting point to have some, numerical numbers, quotas, a deliberate direction to move things along. Otherwise, honestly, it's not going to move organically.
Thank you. Hani, I think you wanted to contribute, and then we'll go to Her Excellency as well.
Yeah, the important thing is to contribute first, Diana. Otherwise, other people steal your ideas. So I was I'm forced to have to agree.
That's why you were trying to jump.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that, and I did have a blog on this on LinkedIn, where I was saying that the talking didn't work, right? We've been talking about this for years and years and years, and it didn't work. So I'm in favor of active intervention because I think otherwise you can't move the needle. So my example was on the graduates, right, where we had 500 graduates every year. If we just said, to the lines of service, please recruit, please try to be diverse in your recruiting, maybe things would have moved a bit. But if we said 50-50, that's harder to achieve. That's purposeful. That has a target, and people did that. So I do believe in those active interventions all the way up, by the way. So at the supervisory board level, what we said was we wanted to have what we called a diversity wildcard seat. So after the selection process had happened for our board, we said that newly elected board will have the option of adding an additional board member if they find themselves lacking in a particular area. And it could be gender, it could be geography, it could be a particular skill set that's missing from that board. But the important thing is to have a diverse board. And so if and the reason we did it so that we wouldn't associate it only with women necessarily, we said, well, any kind of diversity. So the board would look at itself post-election, say, are we missing something here? And then fill that with that wild card. And hopefully it's not a woman because we've already filled, we already have that representation. So it could be something else, and we left that flexibility open. So that was an idea that we put forward that worked really well actually the first couple of times. But I just wanted to say, Diana, that I am in favor of very active intervention, purposeful, to set targets and to push people to do that. Otherwise, it won't happen naturally.
Thank you, Hani. It's wonderful to hear the wild card idea as well in terms of bringing that diversity of thought into the boardroom. It's a great way of tackling it. Your Excellency.
Yes, actually, I really believe in quota, and I'm all for support for having women in the board, at least 1 or 2 members in the board, because it's not fair to let women compete on equal rights with men, because men has many advantages to women. So in the Shura in Bahrain, I'm trying to bring some laws to force companies to at least include 1 or 2 board members in and I really very happy to hear about UAE are going towards that. And this is what we all need. We need some support to women to be represented, and I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Since we've asked that question, we've had questions flooding in. So as I read through them, I'm going to give the audience the opportunity to just answer a quick poll question as well. So if we can launch that, please. On your screen, you'll see a poll. It says, what do you feel is the primary enabler of diversity at board level? So looking not necessarily at the quota side, enable it as well. And if you can make your selection, please, that would be great.
Sorry, do we have to answer it?
No, this is for the audience, and then I'll read out and share the
Okay.
And then we can have some comments on this as well, to see what the audience's thoughts are. And there are many questions coming through as well. So clearly an area within the topic of much debate. So we've got about 30 seconds left for answering the polls. And we can see on this side that it's shifting quite a lot at this point in time. So we'll see how we end up. Okay, great. So looking at leadership commitment and support as your highest, all of the above after that. Positive role models, something I think has come up in this conversation several times over, knowing that you can see other people, other women actually achieving that and aspire to that. A lack of knowledge and female confidence is quite low on those on this poll as well. So very interesting to that. Clearly that tone from the top, in addition to regulation, is something that people see as a way of actually getting this moving quicker. We do have some more questions from the audience. One being, how do you close the gender pay gap in the private sector in the region? Which is a great question. Is there anybody who would like to go first at answering that?
Could I?
Please, Your Excellency.
Yes, actually, I don't know about other companies, but at our companies, we have equal pay for men and women, and we made sure that they have equal opportunity when they join in, and they are paid the same amount as the men. And also for promotion, we always look at, like I said, we made the committee to look at all possibilities to promote women and in a way give them more preferences. There is something I wanted to say before, which is in Bahrain, the unemployment of women is about 85% of the unemployed are women in Bahrain, which means that there is, this is again, sorry to go back to the point of quota. That's so important to push women in the business because of the unfavorable they get from employees. And that's the reason why we are trying to promote our employees and try to employ as many as we can and give them equal pay and equal promotion.
That's a huge statistic to share with the audience, and clear that quotas would really help to address that quickly. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm very mindful of time, so I'll leave with one final question for our panelists, and then perhaps we can go to final thoughts. What are some of the examples of diversity, innovation, and cultural change within your organization trickled upwards from future leaders? So perhaps from your junior employees who aspire to being those partners of the future or those board directors. How is your organization actually listening to the new employees coming through the ranks and responding to their requests?
You want me to jump in?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I think the pandemic's taught us a bunch of things, and I think we're still all learning in this area. And one thing that's come through very interestingly is that, we talk about flexibility, and as it turns out, flexibility is kind of, let's say, dominated by the more senior people in the organization, and then the more junior ones. And you're asking about the junior people, Diana, are the adjusting variable, unfortunately. So you take a working parent, and for instance, they say, well, I bring my kids from school, I help them with their homework, I put them to bed, and then I'm good to go at 9 p.m. So I'm scheduling, I'm working flexibly, and I'm scheduling my meetings starting from 9 to 11. Thank you very much. And so what we're seeing is that having an open flexibility like that is falling hardest on the most junior people who are not in control of the team agenda and the team guideline and all of that. So what we noticed there was that people said, we didn't really want to work that flexibly, and please, could you maybe designate some times during the day as collaboration time? So say 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and schedule the team meetings during that time. And then we can be flexible before 9 and after 3, but let's at least have some core time where we're in it all together. And that was something I think that we learned as we came out of the pandemic. The other example I'll give is that in our US firm, apparently, everyone was given the choice to work 100% virtually, right? 60,000 people, professionals. Mm-hmm. And the option is you can work 100% virtual if you would like to. What we've noticed so far, and this happened maybe 2 months ago, is that very few actually opted for 100% virtual. Most people want to see their teammates, want to interact, want to have that teamwork feeling. And that's also something that's come through very, very clearly, that we want to be with each other. We want to learn from each other. We want to interact and get all those clues from each other on how we operate and how we interact with our clients and our colleagues. So the being there was really important, and then flexibility to maybe draw the guardrails for flexibility so that it doesn't become a free for all. That came through, and both of those have implications for women who probably were hit harder perhaps by the virtual working. And for men as well, and the more junior people that bore the brunt of some of the policies that we did, and we learned that very quickly.
That's a great insight. Thank you so much, Hani. Wael, what about within PepsiCo? What have you learned?
No, I think this time I'll also agree with Hani. I think the flexibility is something that we've been talking about very frequently over the past, especially the past 6 to 9 months, I would say, as people were coming out of the pandemic, people coming to the office, some people staying at home. So this is the area where we've seen, everybody from the organization trying to really put some form of, organization to the chaos that has happened with the flexibility of working from home. Because what ends up happening is that you end up having a calendar filled from 8 a.m. till 9 p.m. and it's back to back, and people find slots, they book them, and sometimes you cannot move them. And one of the things that came from all levels of the organization is that people really need to take ownership of their own agendas. You need to book time for you, for personal. You need to have the flexibility to decline meetings if they fall within your hours, etc. And I think this is important because as you're working virtually, a lot of these connects are video calls, and sometimes managers want to see their teams. They want to have their cameras on, they want to have their cameras off. And I think giving the flexibility for people to do whatever they need to get the job done is something that came from the organization, because people, when they're home, they're not necessarily having an office environment, because not everybody's working in a 4 or 5 bedroom house. Some people are still, they're single parents, they're living, whatever it is. So I think that's something that really came across, is that as you start empowering people in this agenda, you feel that they are starting to make much bolder decisions and speaking their opinions fearlessly about how they want to run this agenda afterwards, so that they are able to manage their time and their family life according. So that was really one of the key things that we saw coming through, especially over the past few months.
Thank you. Your Excellency?
Yes, actually, we went through, in the pandemic, we went through times where we were all working from home. But I think I saw that the productivity is going down because I feel we are all humans, and human interaction is very, very important in business. And the business prospers with humans, and you cannot just work from the screens and, with the video. And so in the end, we all have to be together and give us more enthusiasm to work harder and to see each other experience. And that's very important, I think.
Absolutely. So some very interesting points there, and it's good to hear that the voices of the younger people within the organizations are still being heard. I can imagine it in some organizations that would be quite frightening to do. So it's very much it's great to see that the leadership within that is making sure that those measures are in place to listen to those voices as well, and make sure that they feel comfortable enough to say, those 9 o'clock phone calls aren't working for me. It's definitely something we have to look at in terms of building that culture and making sure that we're being inclusive for this. We have a couple of minutes left. So in terms of your final thoughts then, please, from each of you, Hani, if you would like to begin, and then we'll go to Wael and finish with Her Excellency. So your final thoughts for the audience, please.
Sure. So, I mean, our experience has shown that I don't think there was a single thing that we did that completely, moved the needle for us in a big way. It was a lot of little things along the way, a lot of learnings, iterations, and we started with a few policies, then we put some targets, and then we saw that that wasn't happening, so we intervened. We brought in the training, and then we said no, we need some mentors. We engaged other CEOs across other industries to give us their thoughts and ideas. And so I would say it's it's a determined kind of a journey, bringing in all the resources available, iterating, but keeping the eye on the prize and the impact of that. So we don't have the answer, and there's a lot more to do, but I think some progress has been made along the way.
Thank you, Hani. Wael, final thought?
No, I think it's, recapping what I've said, I think it's just trying to find ways of how we can look at the gaps, look at the challenges, and just double down and see where we can really unblock some of these things that are, stopping people from progressing, or whether recruiting people externally to the environment. I think this is the most important part. We cannot really take things for granted and just have a deliberate approach to doing this. And if you are to move the needle on numbers and percentages, we really have to see the two challenges and try to address them.
Yes, absolutely. What we measure matters. Your Excellency, final thoughts?
Well, yeah, my final thought is, I mean, with the pandemic, we just felt that, that was the worst experience I have, and we thought that life was going to end, when I remember that February, March 2020, when there was a lockdown and our sale went to zero. And basically, I thought that's the end of the world, But I mean, just tells you how, human beings are resilient. And we just, and then in the end, we all work together to overcome that crisis. And today, we are back to pre-pandemic, and everything, we are back to work. And so I'm very happy to see that, in the end, hard work and believing in yourself and your business works. And, that really makes me happy.
Thank you so much. That's all we have time for today. I think we've learned an awful lot in the last 45 minutes, actually. Some great tips and tricks and stories of things that have worked and haven't worked. And it's very, very helpful for us, obviously, to come together as a community and share these, especially when we're all aiming, obviously, at being very intentional about creating that future. So thank you very much to our speakers, and thank you also for the audience. And from me at Aurora, thank you very much for having me. Rania.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you to our esteemed moderator, Diana, and our esteemed panelists, Hani, Wael, and Your Excellency, Mona, for sharing your insights. And a special thank you to our esteemed partner, Arab International Women's Forum, led by Dr. Afnan Shuaibi, without which we could not have had this panel discussion. We encourage our audience. We see that there is a lot of questions, and there's a lot that we have learned from this, but we encourage you to reach out to the Pearl Initiative and Arab International Women's Forum, as this is one of a series of virtual as well as in-person discussions highlighting the connection between females in leadership and senior level representation, as well as the links to improved business sustainability and corporate governance. So we encourage you to attend, invite your colleagues to the upcoming sessions as we delve deeper into some of the topics explored today, including how to hold leaders accountable through using KPIs, data, targets, and other means, workshops with HR departments on gender inclusive approaches to human resources and talent management, as well as sessions on some of the things that we talked about, the conscious and unconscious biases that occur across the organizations and amongst individuals, and how to overcome it. And last but certainly not least, a key topic and a theme that I think really came out of today's conversation and a lot of the work that Aurora 50 does is the importance of mentorship, talent development, and creating communities like this for females and males alike as we look to improve sustainability of businesses by increasing diversity and representation of women, men, and diversity in all leaders of leadership. Thank you all for your time today, and please stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. We
Goodbye.
enjoyed it.
Thank you, Excellency.